Hello, hello.
So in a couple minutes here, I'm going to bring out the other two members of the Blood Poetry team we got out here for you. But just going to set up right and tell you a little bit of information to start off. Hey, you don't like it? Cool. So, I want to start off by asking you guys, how many people, by a show of hands, know about spoken word, slam, poetry jams? That's quite a few of you. So, how many of you like or love spoken word poetry or poetry slam? That's awesome. So, now this may be a surprising question, but are there any of you by a show of hands who don't like it or hate it? You can, that's okay. I encourage you to be clear about this, for real. This is also your space. We want you to have your feelings and your agency as well. Hopefully we'll be able to convince you that it's not so bad in the next little bit of time. That's what I'm hoping. So, I wanted to start off by just giving people a little bit of an idea of both about slam and spoken word and the history of it and the way it works now. So, I think the most important place to start is talking about spoken word poetry and sort of what it is and what it means. And I think the most vital and important thing people to know about spoken word is that it has human beings, as long as there have been human beings who spoke languages, have engaged in spoken word poetry. And every language that has ever existed in every latitude and longitude has poetry that predates written language, right? Everywhere in the world. And that's changed a lot. Most people don't read poems any longer. But by a show of hands, who's ever read a poem out loud in front of people? That's a lot of you guys. So, how many of you did that in school? Put your hand back if you did it in school. And let's see who did it not in school. Who has read poetry of their own will not in school? Wow. Give it up to yourself. Seriously, that's amazing. Cool. These are kind of more exciting to a lot of people. And so poetry has kind of been forced into the academy, forced into textbooks, forced off of the stage, right? So slam is it has the goal of trying to put poetry back in center stage because you guys engage with this art form. And part of the way we do that is we encourage you guys to respond, to make noise, to clap, to snap, to say, yeah, during a poem, right? So how many of you guys have seen YouTube videos of performance poetry, right? Yeah? So you hear the audience making noise, getting enthusiastic, right? And it can be distracting sometimes, but the thing I want to say to you guys is that we'll all have more fun. We're going to read some poems for you tonight, a couple of them mixed into our presentation, and we'll all have more fun if you guys make noise, if you're enthusiastic, if you snap. We will all have a better time. Let's try that. Imagine I did something really cool. Make some noise. So, let's try snapping. Let's say you heard a really cool line, coolest line in the world. So, one of the reasons we snap is because I can still talk over you guys. The people sitting next to you can still hear me talk while you're snapping. It's a way to show enthusiasm and still be respectful. So if you hear some snap-worthy lines tonight, I want to see you snapping. I want to see those hands high. I want to hear that stuff. You have no idea how much your enthusiasm makes me feel great up here. I want to let you guys know that I feel great because you guys feel great. Because you're responding and having a good time. And that's what this is really about. It's about having a dialogue, having an energetic exchange through art. Now, that is the baseline I'm going to lay for you guys. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a piece of work with you that I think is really important. And then I'm going to bring out the rest of the squad and they're going to share some work with you and we're going to talk about the path that got us to this place. Cool. You guys all good with that? You got that? You ready to hear a poem? Let's try that one more time. You guys ready to hear a poem? I believe you that time. This is called God in Code. The poet Rumi wrote about God in code. One tale is that his Sufi religion was illegal during his lifetime, and so, by concealing his reverence for God in the imagery of alcohol, by in fact hiding the divine in vice, Rumi was able to continue his sacred tradition unhindered. The poet Tupac wrote about God and revolution. Hidden in the violence and oppression of this society, one tale is that his very race was illegal during his lifetime, and so, by concealing his reverence for his own people, the poet Tupac was able to continue his sacred tradition unhindered. The poet Christ did not conceal God in his writing. He was killed for his beliefs and then raised from the dead in the stories of his followers. The poet Tupac was killed for his beliefs and then raised from the dead by non-believers in the desert of Southern California on an ancient indigenous burial ground turned polo field turned music festival where brown people once buried their dead and white kids like me now get high. What privilege to dance on graves whose names you do not know. In 2012, at the Coachella Music Festival with 85,000 gathered to watch, the poet Tupac was resurrected as a hologram. They transformed his flesh to light and forced him to pray. And to pray, they showed the masses his God would not come. In this country, the poet Christ is primarily worshipped by those who wish him white, who choose not to think of Christ as a man oppressed for his race, choose not to think of Christ as a product of human politics. Instead, they pray to his body, nailed to the cross he was killed on, call his murder a miracle, and then oppress in his name. The American translations of Rumi are among the world's most popular poetry, but their translator speaks no Middle Eastern language, no Arabic, no Arabic, no Dari, no Farsi, no Persian, nothing. And his translations neatly sidestep any reference to oppression. These are illusions crafted for white folk, for me, to help me keep my breakfast down while I read the newspaper, to help me swallow bull like post-racial America. And so, the hologram will never tell us that the poet Tupac came from a family of black revolutionaries. The hologram will never tell us the poet Tupac died violently as a result of his own violence and that of a violent system. The hologram says nothing about institutionalized racism, nothing about racism at all. A black poet, a Sufi prayer, a Jewish preacher, all turned into white prophets. It is an old trick. It is so easy to make someone speak once they are dead. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Aziza Barnes out onto the stage. Give it up.
Means a great deal to me. I was their first published author of a book called Me, Aunt Jemima, and the Nail Gun. I'm so humbled and happy to be here with y'all today. So much so that I'm gonna read a poem, because I think that makes sense. It's from the book. So I'm a black woman. I write about black things and woman things. I write about other things too, but those are like the go-tos in any given situation. And it's the first poem in this book. I meet a lot of people in this book. I meet Aunt Jemima in this book first. So this was it. So, me and Aunt Jemima walk into a bar, right? And she had bit on a mason jar for her nose to fall in. But her teeth, fingers, and ears all left in the glass, migrating from their rancid host. By the time she sat at the bar, old girl barely had a face. And my dumb ass starts giggling right, and I go, oh no. I know you. You bottle shucking job. You Uncle Tom with a side of pancakes. You made him gone with the wind. You Bojangles for breakfast. You ain't missing Andy like you. Self-hate syrup. You slave gone corporate. You black power fish with a hole in it. You menstrual season issues. You blackface on butter. You Uncle Bitch Shawty on the low. You everybody mammy. You. Her skin has melted to the bar by now, and I can see through Auntie Jed. The muscle she got left shivers on her bones like a saltfish trying to understand air. She sits now the one way I never pictured her, thin and white. Without eyes, she looks at me hard, applies a set of lips to her skull, spits. Quit talking like you know black in the box it came in. You don't know what it is to smile for all them folks, to rot in everybody home except yours, to watch their children, to hear them call you mama, to be hated by your own for trying to find a way out, to feed your enemy for a century and a quarter, to have them profit you while you die slow. You don't know me. I try to console the has-been of blackness. Tell her I didn't mean it, that I'm just a brown girl half-breed mutt that don't know her place, don't know how to hold her tongue or respect the dead. I look up at her, ready to cry out some sweet forgiving, but my hand is nailed to the bar, nailed to the chair, my whole body pierced in rust. I cry, yo, Jemima, what is this? Her teeth form a smile at the bottom of her mason jar. Rock with me. I am your kin. You come from me. And when they bury you, you'll have my face. And now I'm so proud and happy to present Dylan Garrity. Dylan Garrity.
There are a lot of you in here. Can we get one more giant round of applause for Sam? I could tell there were a lot of you in here from backstage because you're being really good at the whole reacting to poetry thing. Keep it up. Alright. I'm gonna read a poem for you guys. Every day when I was 5, my older sister was a teacher. Her students were me, my stuffed rabbit, and an American Girl doll. She'd line us up at the end of her bed and teach us whatever she'd learned in school that day. Now, she teaches ESL in an elementary school in Boston, and every week she tells me stories about her students. Anna does not know how to read in Spanish, much less English, but she still wants to be a writer when she grows up. Juan chooses to stay inside and study at recess so that one day he'll be able to teach his own brother. These kids are good organs in a sick body. In 2001, No Child Left Behind gutted bilingual education. Students who have been in the country for 1 year are now expected to perform at grade level on standardized English tests. My sister is not allowed to instruct them in Spanish. If the kids don't jump high enough, the school loses money. Improving a school by picking its pockets is like tuning a guitar by ripping off the strings. Learning to read in a new language when you can't even read in your own. It's like learning to walk while a pit bull is chasing you. Like learning to sing with the conductor's fist down your throat. This year for my sister's birthday, I got books for her students. A poem on one page in Spanish, the next in English. She's not allowed to help them read the first. Their heritage is a banned book. Learning to read in a new language when you can't even read in your own is like trying to heal a burn victim by drowning them. We are telling these children who have spent their whole lives in the deep end that they'll learn how to swim if they just float out a little farther. In the 1980s, American slaughterhouses began building corrals in curves so no animals could see the blood at the end of the tracks. This is how we kept them moving forward. In 2001, we began building the hallways of our schools in curves. This is how we keep them moving forward. You never learn, you fail the test. You never learn, you fail the test. You never learn, you drop out. I know. I am lucky enough to be one of the winners of this game. I was handed a head start and a rule book in my own tongue, but the winners of a rigged game should not get to write the rules. On the television, some senator preaches that throwing money at an urban school is like feeding caviar to your dog. They just won't know what to do with it. After all, if these parents can't take care of their own children, why should we? Well, tell that to Anna, who has my sister translate newsletters aloud for her father because he too was never taught how to read. Tell that to Juan, whose mother and baby brother are still in Guatemala, whose father works 3 jobs. My sister tells me school is the most stable place in these kids' lives. She has been a teacher since she was smaller than they are, but since when does being a teacher mean having to swear not to help? Since when does being a teacher mean having your hands tied while the schoolhouse burns to the ground? We are leading these children along a track built in circles as their lungs fill with smoke, telling them it is their fault. They can't find a way out.
Beautiful, just beautiful. I think we can clap for him again. Yeah, so I'm gonna tell you about how I got here, and I'm gonna do it briefly. So I'm a Los Angeles-born Black woman poet, queer Black woman poet, and I found these guys, right? Yeah. And the way I got into poetry was there was a lot of things I felt I couldn't say. Not even couldn't say them well, just couldn't say. Truths about myself that I couldn't confront. And I walked around scared a lot of the time. In Los Angeles, in my home, in New York to where I moved. And walking in fear is no way to walk. So I decided to, I always loved poetry. I always thought that maybe that would be a way to face myself. And I remember I was walking down the street with a friend of mine who was like all about poetry, everything. Like it was his life from day one. He was very good at it, still is. And he handed me some headphones and was like, yo, you have to listen to this poem. And I never really listened to poetry before. Like I was 18, I mainly read it or like went to see it live, but I never listened to it. And it was this poet, Rachel McKibbins. If y'all are familiar, she's kind of the big deal, good news. And I was listening to a poem of hers, Central Park, and it was the first time I heard like the simplicity, the cleanness, the grace that you could approach your pain with. And I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And so then I started writing a lot, and learning that like, if you want to get to that place of just like, oh, that was just good, clean, maybe that's true, you know, true good, then you have to dedicate like a lot of time to it. And so for this book, I found myself just writing and editing for hours a day, and it was for their book competition. So I had no idea that the book would even like become a book. I just knew like, I have to put everything into this. Like, everything I have, you know? And it was, and everything turned out to be an hour or 2 a day for about 2 months. An hour or 2 a day for 2 months, compiling and editing and showing to people and like, just making sure it was the thing that was in my head. And by that point I sent it in and I was like, okay, now I'm done, I can go like play PlayStation or whatever I do. And, but it was such a joy and a proud moment to see that like, when you do put in the work, it comes to fruition. Like whatever you feed will feed you, is what I found. Like I fed this every day, you know, constantly, consistently, trying to chisel down, like, is that exactly how I want to present myself? Is that exactly what I want to say? Or is it at least close? And now it feeds me every day, and I'm here in front of you. And it definitely went past the point of me being able to confront myself. Now it's a point of like me being able to just enjoy waking up and writing and being obsessed by things. There's a lot of poems about musicians, obsessed with music, the sonic quality of words, and now obsessed with being able to meet all of you, like my goodness. I can only imagine the things that you're gonna do, what you're gonna write. But I think just always knowing, like, if you feed what you love, it will feed you. And if you look at yourself, you ain't all that bad, you know. So,
No, maybe not so much. No. That is one. Your fault. I like being on this side. So we just want to talk a little bit about what Button is as the sort of next phase of this guy. And before I do that, Aziza mentioned that she was the first published author on the Button Poetry Press, which is a really exciting thing for us to have this incredible woman who you just heard talk and you heard read as our first author. I'd like you to give it up for Aziza one more time. It's amazing.
As excited as she was to send us her manuscript, we were very, very excited to read it, and when we got it, we're like, yeah, we're putting this out into the world. And actually, I'm going to tell you two things that she's never heard before. Maybe, I don't know, maybe sure the first one. But when I read this manuscript she's talking about that she labored on day after day for months, as soon as I read it, I knew what book I wanted to publish. I read more manuscripts, but I hadn't decided. It was incredible. I had a moment, a connection with a person I barely knew across the country through words. And then, at a little table getting ready for this event, for this SPARKS event, we were asked about the proudest moments in our lives that we've had. And I bypassed one of my proudest moments, which was the moment that we created Aziza's book and brought something into the world. So before we talk about details of what Button is, I wanted to say that it's something that is about pride and passion and about creating things for other people that they can be passionate about sharing passion. And that's sort of the ballgame. Film, document, and distribute performance poetry media, which is something that didn't really exist a ton in the world until pretty recently, honestly. We run a YouTube channel, which you should all check out if you haven't already. How many of you have heard of Button Poetry before? How many of you had heard of it before you found out we were speaking here? That's still a really cool amount. That makes me really happy. We run a YouTube channel that has gotten 25 million plus views in the last 6 months for poetry, as Sam said in his last class, not for Rihanna or Katy Perry, but against them, but for poetry. It's pretty cool. So just because I think the numbers are fun, that amount of time is 95 human years. That is 95 times around the sun in 3-minute clicks. That means in 6 months, more than a very healthy Japanese lifespan has happened in poem views, which is kind of impossible to us. I want to share with you guys that for us, that success isn't always automatic. It can be really exciting. That we are overjoyed and astonished by our own success. You don't have to know you're going to win to chase something or to find success. What are we supposed to be talking about right now? Yeah, cool, 1 second. I want to talk about this. Well, no, about where we are now. So, one of the things we're here to talk to you about is about following your signature path, following your passion, right? And that's how we got to this place. And I just wanted to just to share with you, and we'll say more of this as we move a little bit further, but that it's not something we always knew the truth of. We didn't start out 3 or 4 years ago certain that we would be here today. We weren't we want to produce this big thing and then get invited to a high school to speak to a bunch of students because of the awesome thing we produced. It wasn't like we had a big 5-year plan. We knew exactly what we wanted to do, and success meant enacting this exact vision of the future. That's not what it is. That's not how it works.
In fact, to be totally transparent, we told you where we are and our successes. When I started this thing, my goal was as follows. It was quite ambitious. My dream was to create and distribute burned CDs to 5 cities in the Midwest. That's what we were going to do. We were going to burn CDs of poems, 5 cities, we were going to mail them to people. That was our entire goal. We were going to mail CDs to people, and those people were going to distribute them to their friends so that you could be heard in 5 cities instead of just the one you performed in. We've gone a little bit further than that, I would say. And I wanted to give some of that idea, just to give you an idea, like you can start small. Dreams and goals and passions don't have to start, you don't have to be trying to buy the Empire State Building every time. Maybe it's a lemonade stand, maybe it's a bike repair shop, I don't know. Maybe it's a parkour studio. I don't know if you saw Brad today, but that guy blows me away. Anybody see Brad doing parkour out there anywhere? He's incredible, and he's like, I think the only guy I've ever met who launched a parkour studio. You know, like that's not only the Empire State Building, but it's an incredible accomplishment and one of a kind. I just want to give some idea of the context and of the scope of things. That being said, speaking of the scope of things, I'm going to share another poem with you that is more intense than the things we're talking about. It is again about social justice and about what I believe about this culture, and I believe in speaking truth and justice. Breathe out before you squeeze the trigger, they say. Squeeze the trigger, they say. The trigger, they say. The scope of a sniper rifle is a spotlight. The scope is a beautiful woman, a beautiful woman's gaze. You have caught it. You are caught in it. The crosshairs are a crucifix. The scope is a spotlight. We will all be insurrectionists one day. We have each got a Molotov cocktail birthday candle coming to us. You can tell yourself the prettiest lies. But we have each got manacles we cannot make believe away. Now, none of us are full-time escape artists, and you cannot cut your own zip ties off, but there is this fairy tale of protest, a fairy tale of free men marching in solidarity, but free men do not march, and there are no free men anywhere. We talk about resistance with kid gloves, with euphemisms that leave the violence out, because we are all hoping to be terrorists in wooden shoes. None of us wants to hurt anyone, to knock anything down. Even the poorest among us has so much to lose, but we are dogs trained to kick ourselves, and we are trying not to be. The scope is the patron saint of free speech. The scope is a beautiful woman staring at you from the crowd. The scope of a sniper rifle is a spotlight. Just think of all the people its barrel has made famous. It seems like real-life heroes always find themselves in a sniper's sights, as if the golden bullet were an award given to those doing this world's best work. No wonder celebration and gunfire sound so similar. I imagine the homes of great leaders, bullet holes above their mantelpiece, bullet holes among their Nobel Prizes. When I was a child, I had my little sister hold a laser pointer to my temple while I spoke. This is how you say something meaningful in America. If no one is trying to kill you, you are not working hard enough. If you work hard enough, you will feel good in the heat of that spotlight. No wonder we dream of being crucified on crosshairs. No wonder we love to stand in the scope. How could you want anything else? Breathe out before you squeeze the trigger, they say. Squeeze the trigger, they say. The trigger, they say. The scope of a sniper rifle is a beautiful woman staring at you from the crowd. You cannot see her, but you know she is there.
God, it's a great deal taller than I am. Give me a moment for technicalities. Or just switching mics.
I think it's this one you want. Yeah, this one.
I want this one. I'm gonna do a poem. Is that okay? Hypnophobia. A fear of sleep. A fear of dreaming. Someone is choking you while you sleep. It is your English teacher. The one who wears those awful khaki pants that show his manhood everything. He cackles over your bed, your skin, that hot piece of coal. Someone must have cut off the wire, the one connecting your brain to your backhand. Not even an eyelid will save you. He hears your heart. He can't stand the pulse of it, the off-putting way you want to save yourself. He rolls up his sleeve and tumbles his arm down your throat, uproots your heart, says to you, hearts as she loses them. I am not afraid of the night. I am afraid of its obligation. To close your eyes and unleash that tight fist of knowing I could not have been born this way. For every fear there is said to be a triggering effect. Someone holding a gun saying, this may be my fault, but it's still your story. A fear of sleep is a fear of losing control. In my hometown, there was a girl up the street that knew every part of you is a mouth. Look at you. How open you are. How your body can only say yes to me. Look how your fight forgot you. I could never land a punch in my dreams. Never rip my attacker apart nail by nail and see how helpless that house was. I'm not a fair fight. I don't know a lot of words. I don't know how to say. I slept with every man after you and woke up on fire. I don't know how to say. Everyone in my dreams is born of you. I don't know how to say. You cannot have me. Not now. Not again. Don't sleep by yourself. There must be some part of you that don't trust the rest of you. Try to find someone who don't want to gouge out her eyes just to make sense of the dark. This was never about finding a body to share the bed with. I am not lonely. I am not the weak calling my sickness the tyranny. What I fear is what I can't hold. What I would win the world for.
This is awesome.
So, one of the things we want to talk to you about is just about the importance that we place on storytelling. We really believe, as you might have gathered, that story is vital to the human experience. That the most essential thing you can do is be known and know others. That without that connection and the possibility to share, there isn't anything, and nothing is worth anything.
And the stories are how we know people and how we know ourselves. We understand ourselves by telling ourselves stories. We understand the people around us by knowing their stories. Stories are essential to everything we know in the world about ourselves and about others and about history and everything.
And so if I were to talk about what my signature path is, my passion at this point in life is about making space for other people's stories. Making space for my own, respecting my own stories and making a place for them, but really about making space for other people's. About knowing that in any context, in a conversation, over lunch, or on a stage, or on the internet, that everyone's story needs space. And I can't make it for everyone, but I'm doing that work. And I really would like to, honestly, tell you all that you can do that work in your daily life. And that I would like to, entrust you with that responsibility. That you will do your best to make space for other people's stories in your lives. To know about other people's experience and respect their stories. Not tell them they're wrong. Not contradict or demean what their experience is. Yeah. I think is really important, and I hope you guys can take that to heart.
Yeah. I'm going to do one final poem for you guys, and I think we're about done. 12:05 is when this ends. Cool. We're at 6 minutes? Okay, I'll talk for a second and then do a poem. Sorry, yeah. So this poem is very related to what we just said about stories. This poem, as you'll see, it's about my family, and in the process of writing this, I made like 15 pages of notes. I talked to my mom and my uncles and my grandmother, and I wrote down every single story they told me for this poem, and realized that there was no way that I could turn 15 pages and put all of that into a poem that made any sense or that anyone would ever want to listen to. Because no one wants to listen to me talk for 20 minutes. The thing that I'm excited about what we do, like Sam said, making space for stories, our own stories, and other people's stories, and hopefully eventually your stories, and you can make that space too. And what I find so exciting about what we do is that we are able to tell stories in this public fashion. We speak stories, we can condense them, we make understandable stories out of complex things, and that's what my final poem's about. So thank you guys all for listening to us, and this is the story of my grandfather. When he was 19 years old, his right hand was crushed by a printing press. He was supposed to lose the hand, but a young doctor saved it just in time for the war. This is the story of the war. My grandfather repaired tanks. Behind the front lines, away from the cameras, he pulled pieces of dead men from the machines and sent the machines back out to the field. This is the story of the war a decade later. Back then, you didn't talk about depression. There was no such thing as PTSD. When my uncle, age 7, asked him who won the war, my grandfather said, "Nobody." This is the story of my grandfather, the machinist. I have a newspaper from 1981, a story about the Nobel Prize for Physics, a photograph of the winner, a Harvard man standing by his machines. This man is not my grandfather. Beneath the photo, my grandfather has written, "I designed and built almost everything in this picture." They worked together for 10 years, but my grandmother says the physicist never even remembered his name. If you asked that Harvard man, there would be no story of my grandfather, just a pair of disembodied hands. This is the problem with stories. They have to leave something out. The editor cuts a line and someone's face fades. The editor says 200 words or less and suddenly a whole family goes missing. The spotlight isn't about the light, it's how it makes everything around it dark. My grandfather's face is erased from every story. The machines survive, but the man who made them doesn't. The machines make the photo, but their maker is out of frame. But we choose where to point the camera. We choose how to tell the story. We can choose which clothing the hero wears. I could tell you this is a story about a soldier, or I could tell you this is a story about the blue-collar man, but really, this is just the story of my grandfather. I did not know him. I was born too late, but my family tells me his name. Alfred Franzosi. I know that name might only live in this moment, that there are other stories with greater stakes, but still, I will tell you his name. I will repair this old machine. I will let my grandfather live again because I could not know him while he was living. Once, when he was younger than I am now, his right hand was crushed by a printing press, crushed by other people's stories. When it healed, he began to build. He used his hands to build tanks and his hands to build cradles. His hands were the last thing to touch dead soldiers and the first to touch his newborn sons. He built a good family, and that family built me, and now I use my hands to build his story. This story is not a eulogy. A eulogy seals the casket. A eulogy lets no air out. This story is a resurrection. Jesus was not resurrected by God. He was brought back by the people who told his stories. It does not take a miracle to raise the dead, to leave behind the tombstone, and take the name with you. Thank you.